This week, Josh Moore, president and peon at Era Security, will discuss AI and LLMs. Think of the children. Then we dive into some more AI and LLM topics with a splash of hardware hacking featuring Matthew Carpenter, senior principal researcher and innovation at Grimm. In the security news, gay furry hackers, the Bluffs Bluetooth attack, we dive deep into problems with vulnerability reporting and CVE, spoofing GPS attacks in the wild, Mirai 0 days and other mysteries, 2+ years dwell time at a chip maker, what could go wrong? How not to respond to vulnerability reports again and again, and ransomware attacks at health services. All that and more on to this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly.
Welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to a man who, like his printer, can smell fear. Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Coming to you in super low definition compliments of Darth Vader himself. This is Paul's Security Weekly, episode number 808, being recorded on November 29th, 2023, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island with my illustrious host, Mr. Larry Crusher. What's up, man?
Same stuff, different day.
We used to say it looked like Radio Shack threw up on the table. Today it looks like Hacker Warehouse threw up on the table.
Hacker Warehouse and cheap stuff from Amazon.
AliExpress. AliExpress is probably more.
Yeah,
well, I don't know.
Either way.
Either way. We get some stuff going on.
Yeah.
On the lines remotely, Mr. Bill Swearingen is here with us. Bill, welcome back. Or not.
It's not fear that I'm smelling today.
Oh, there he is. You were frozen there for a minute. He's back now.
Man, so you missed my joke. Well, hey, everybody. I'm glad to be here.
He did say it's not fear that he's smelling today.
That's right. I sit next to Larry, so it's tough to distinguish fear from other things. Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us. Jeff, welcome.
Happy to be on the air with you guys.
Woohoo.
Josh Marpet joining us this evening. Josh, welcome.
Thank you very much. Always glad to be here. It's going to be a fun night.
It sure is. We got a packed show. A couple of quick announcements. Join our Discord channel. You can chat with the host, ask questions, customize live stream alerts, and more by visiting securityweekly.com/Discord. Josh is the owner and president of Era Security, an information security and business improvement consulting firm. Josh is an active member in the information security community, though more active behind the scenes these days. Josh is an affiliated with the Eins Research Institute and has ties to SANS Community, ISSA, Agile Iowa, OWASP, DC 612, Central Iowa Area Linux Users Group, and InfraGard. Josh is once again working on a new book. This one is focused on vendor management, as well as cross-curricular efforts pulling from other industries and niches of IT. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Hey, it's nice to have you. Josh, I guess first, before we dig into AI and ML stuff, tell us how you get your start in information security.
Well, I got my start, like I think a lot of us did back in the late 90s, early 2000s, because there was a problem no one else wanted to touch. And I was running a bunch of Linux servers. I'd built I wouldn't say a large network by today's standards, but it was geographically spaced out and based on Red Hat 9. Eventually, I think at the time it was 6.2, and there was a bunch of attacks, the SSH issue, and started losing boxes left and right, and I had to go through and bring everything back up. And from there, it just kept finding other things broken and kept fixing them.
As one does. I remember Red Hat 5.2 was one of my first installs that I hung out on the internet, and it was like owned instantly.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's not the case today.
I'm sure if you put up 5.2 today, it would still be on instantly.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great point. Josh, tell us about what your day job is today.
My day job is basically helping various companies with security, prioritization, understanding what's going on. I have a lot of conversations. It's really shifted to discussions and getting a solid understanding of where security fits in different places, right? I work with some companies doing a lot of agile, shifting security into the development process. I work with others where security is more business practices and, trying to get vulnerability automation in place and things like that. It's really process focused these days.
Nice. And when it comes to AI and LLMs, have you done research on these? Are you working with them, or is it more about the kind of philosophy behind, like, where does this go from here?
So for me, it's about the philosophy, right? I've done some work around how how AI affects like other things. I think we have enough people right now focusing on the security aspects of AI, but how is it going to transform other things? I started looking into it, really from a school perspective a while back, when I realized that AI is going to be as transformative as electricity was back in the day, when computers first became available. We've lived through a lot of changes, right? We've lived through the growth of the internet, we've lived through the growth of the web, and growth and then commercialization, and we've seen the patterns. This is a bigger one than we've seen before. And when I started talking, with the kids' schools, and realized that everybody was taking, let's not allow it because it makes it hard to do, the type of grading that's traditionally been done, I realized that anybody who goes at it with that approach is going to be at a significant disadvantage by the time they graduate. So I started pulling together resources, looking at how they could be useful in different ways, and it's really surprisingly taking off. I didn't go out to change the world here. I wanted to help some kids, and the doc I put together is being shared widely now. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I feel like we as a society, when there's new innovation, we tend to kind of limit it, I think, out of just FUD, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know about electricity in schools. Like, we should stay with candles. Right? Maybe it's the earliest,
Right.
of those type of examples. Maybe the same thing with a calculator, a computer, the internet. And, like, of course, now those are everyone. You go into college or school or whatever. Everyone gets issued a Chromebook when they go to elementary school at a certain thing. So
Yeah. The one that got me angry a few years back was when teachers were saying that kids had to learn cursive. And I'm like, yes, cursive has strong benefits. There are things you learn with fine motor skills and, cross-connecting the brain hemispheres when you're learning how to do cursive. But the fact is, we don't need it today, right? Just like we don't need lamplighters today. The job is gone. Teaching things just because that's how they were taught to you just indicates that you are not paying attention to what kids are going to need when they're adults. And AI is it, right now. AI helps people that have, okay, bit of a step back. When I was a kid, I never learned to spell. And I never learned to spell because it was boring and hard. And I had a computer that did it for me because my grandfather gave us one when I was quite young. Today, I don't need to spell, right? Technology does it for me. I've gotten better over the last 40 years, but it's still a fundamental change in society. And teachers don't teach spelling like they used to, but they're still teaching the 5-paragraph essay, which puts various kids at disadvantage. Anybody with dyslexia, anybody that has neurodivergence that might not think along those particular ways. And there's a lot more to writing than the 5-paragraph essay. 5-paragraph essay is easy to teach and easy to grade. That doesn't mean it's what everybody needs to learn.
I think the spelling thing is interesting for me, Josh, because one, my kids' spelling is not great at all, and I try and work with them on it and stuff, but I was like, you got to at least rely on technology. Like, don't just skip over the fact that there's a red squiggly line under it. Like, you
Exactly.
have to, address those things. But I agree that teachers don't do a great job of teaching spelling today.
But they don't need to.
Yeah, it's true. I mean,
Right,
everyone has a spell checker, but that was looked at as a crutch when I used to write. I too had a computer at a very young age, and I was like, "Oh, I write papers on the computer," and they're like, "Oh, well, doesn't it have a spell check?" And that's like cheating. I'm like, no, it actually helps me write, so I can focus on the content and not how something's spelled, which is kind of interesting.
I'm gonna disagree a little bit.
Yeah, please, Jeff.
If I might interject,
because I know spell checking was hard on the stone tablets you used to have to carve when you were in school. So,
well, and it was a bitch getting the whiteout off the monitor too. I mean, at some level, I agree with you, but I think, like many things, there's still merit in learning how to spell. I have seen people struggling with not knowing how to spell a word well enough to get the spell checker to get to the right word. Is that a frequent occurrence? No, but and I'm gonna throw a dart or take a jab at AI. What I've been exposed to and what most people talk about it is like, well, it gets it about 90% right. And I'm like, well, that's okay if you're okay with stuff being 90% right, like having the occasional misspelled word, or and I don't know how closely spelling relates to grammar and sentence structure and things like that. But I think words have meaning, at least they used to, and knowing how to spell the words, especially if there's words that are close to being the same thing but may not be the same thing. I don't know. I'm not ready to give up spelling yet, but maybe I'm ready to be put out to pasture. I don't know.
Of spelling. Like, you don't have to remember the spelling for every word, but knowing the rules of how words are spelled, understanding what's out there, understanding how to write. Even if you don't write the essay, you better understand how to format and the structure of an essay. You have to understand how essays are written, and what differentiates a quality essay from a non-quality essay. You may not be able to write in cursive, but you should be able to appreciate the beauty of a well-written piece of literature.
You should be able to appreciate good writing, but you have to understand the purpose of writing. And that is not taught very well in schools. Writing, and there's AI does a lot more than writing, right? We're just using this as an example, but the writing is a way to learn. The writing is a way to communicate. You can write to convince, you can write to amuse. There are lots of different ways to do it. And when trying to remember the spelling, trying to get the word order right, trying to do all of the granular fiddly stuff, while you're also trying to learn this big thing, it gets in the way of the learning, right? Just because, sorry, I need water here. Just because we learned in a particular way, because that's what the technology allowed the teachers to teach us, doesn't mean that that's our kids today need to learn. Learning spelling is interesting because you can understand the root words, how the different languages that form English have kind of come together. And if you want to dig really deep, like into OED and the spelling wars of the 1800s and things like that, right? There's class struggle in there. There's a lot of intellectual posturing behind what we call our spelling system that we don't really think about. That's interesting. I don't think kids need to learn it at that detail. I think there's value in knowing how Latin and Greek words relate to the words we use today. I don't think they need to learn that in middle school. right? What they need to learn is how to communicate with other people in different ways. And I think AI, when used properly, can get that done much more quickly and more effectively than the way we've traditionally taught.
Hey, Josh, I'm interested to hear about your clients when they're concerned about AI, and how should they be using it, or should they be using it, or what concerns do they have bringing, what are those general concerns that most companies are having right now about leveraging an AI in whatever if it's spelling or whatever they're planning on using it for. What are they coming to you for?
So a lot of those conversations are around trustworthiness of AI, right? A lot of us in the security field look at AI as, can we trust it to keep the data we give it safe? Can we trust it to give us accurate results? And when you're looking at, a large language model, or Chat GPT as it was when it was originally launched, for public, that's part of a solution, and it's just a piece, right? It becomes much more effective when you can feed the learning model your own data sets. It becomes more effective when you can connect it to things like, I looked at ChatGPT when it first came out, and I was going, it's interesting. I see why people like it, but I don't really think as it is today it's that useful. But when I saw people connect that to the to Wolfram Alpha, right? And you start, seeing the connections, and recognize that where AI excels is in taking two or more domains that it understands pretty well and connecting them together. It does that fast. It does that well. It does that with, I would say, more accuracy than your average office worker. And that's really what we're doing here with AI, right? AI allows businesses to accelerate. When used properly, it allows them to do things at a slightly better quality level in certain areas. In some areas, it's really bad. But you recognize it's a tool. Now we're going to figure out where that tool is. The thing that concerns me is, what AI also allows businesses to do is to screw up at scale. And we haven't seen what that looks like yet. We got a brief glimpse of it with the International Bank of China. I think I have that right. And what happened a couple weeks ago on the market, because that one was ransomware, but it was a system that ran amok more quickly than people could easily respond. And we're not that far away from that happening at a much, much bigger scale. And I think that's going to concern a lot of people when it finally happens. That's the big risk.
When you say, taking two domains that it understands well, can you just give me a couple examples of what that means?
Sure.
So you gave, that'd be good. I'd like to hear that.
Yeah, one of the first things I did with ChatGPT was I asked it to provide password advice in the form of a country song, and it did a smashing job. Right? Because country songs are formulaic. There's a good database of them. We know what that is. Password advice is relatively standard. We can argue over lengths, we can argue over rotations and things like that, but generally speaking, it's an understood area. And when you combine them together, it works pretty well. I wouldn't really call it creativity the way that humans are creative, but it makes it easy to take an idea from, hey, is there something here, to let's see it, let's get something we can work with, right? A ridiculous example, when I was playing early on with Mid-Journey, right? I asked it to give me a picture of a cat juggling waffles, because I knew the internet has lots of pictures of cats. Waffles are a closed space. We know what those look like, and we know what juggling looks like. And it did a great job. When you asked it to generate a picture of a cat juggling 6 waffles, it did terribly because AI can't count.
Well, at least that AI can't count.
Well, right, that particular one. But it's AI is good when you're working within a relatively known space. Now, we're talking generative AI, right? There's AI you can use for classification and all sorts of things like that, which are interesting. And I think most of us are just going to be exposed to that through products, right? You've got a vendor that has a SIM or a SOC type of technology. They're going to plug in AI to make classification faster, better, things like that. It'll get better over time. I don't think most of us are going to work directly with that. I think we're going to see things like Microsoft's AI plugging into SharePoint, and solving problems like today. A question I get asked a lot is, how do we know which policy is the policy? Because nobody's cleaned things up, right? You've got a SharePoint site that's been migrated from a file share that was from a file share from a file share. Nobody's ever cleaned it up, and being able to tell AI, tell me what is the most recent version of this doc. It may not be right all the time, but it's going to be right and done a lot faster than when you ask a coworker to go and do that for you.
So sorry, I don't mean to be taking over the interview. I just find this topic incredibly interesting.
No,
so
go for it, Bill.
When you start talking about, so if we go back to the school, where do you see AI fitting in with schools and kids? Should we be teaching kids how to instruct AI more than
Absolutely.
we should be teaching them how to spell? Where do you see that fit in?
Sure. So AI, I was having a talk with a friend of mine a little while ago, who's a teacher, a little older than me. So he's been teaching for, I think, 30 years. And he wanted to show off AI to parents. And when you look at, say, introductory Shakespeare class, right? The way it's normally taught is, let's, read a sonnet, let's read a play, let's talk about why this matters, let's find themes and things like that. AI can do all of that in a heartbeat, right? You can feed it Romeo and Juliet and say, what are the three main themes here? And it'll tell you, right? It won't be genius level, but it'll tell you. And what that does is it allows you to shift the conversation from the first level discussing of the play to a higher level of discussing why the play matters, what impact it had in society, what other people think of the play, and it gets you over the hurdle, right? And in school, that's really where I see AI being very helpful. I've seen kids, get stuck on an essay question. They don't start typing because they don't know what the right answer is. And they're too young to know that you find the right answer by starting to write, right? By starting to explore and figure things out. And by getting rid of the blank page problem and giving them something to edit, you wind up at the end with better results, right? If, one of the assignments, more water. One of the assignments the kids were working on recently, I took them to Denver, and we went to the Natural History Museum, and they had to write, a short little essay on what they learned at the Natural History Museum to get some credit. And I've seen what it takes to do that in the past, and it's been 4 to 6 hours of work, which is ridiculous, right? You shouldn't spend more time writing than you spent at the museum. But if they can take bullet points and write out the bullet points and tell AI to make an essay, then they can look at the essay and says, well, that doesn't match my experience. I'm going to change that paragraph. I have them read the essay out loud. I say, are these the words you would use? They say, no, change them to the words you use. And you iterate through much more quickly, so you get to a better quality product in a shorter period of time. And that's the skill they're going to need as adults, right? That's what the AI is going to be able to help them do. And this is just looking at text, right? You could do the same thing with images. I did one project with one of the kids on, they're trying to start an internet business. So what are possible names? What are possible logos? What are some ideas? You're getting stuck thinking through this project. Ask AI how people get unstuck. How do you recognize when you're stuck? And they blew through a project plan that was put together without AI that would have been like a week long, got it done in an hour. And now they have the rest of the week to develop products for their portfolio, put things on Etsy, put things on Redbubble, things like that, which is really where they should be focusing.
Josh, I want to go back to LLMs as a learning tool, and one of my concerns is the way I like to learn and teach, at least part of it is I like to struggle doing it the manual way first, and then I like to use the tool. And my fear is with LLMs that we're going to have students gravitating towards the easy way rather than I'm going to go build my Linux system from scratch before like I automate, or I'm going to go run this firmware through the next open source project, right? That automatically analyzes it when you have to sit down and do it manually first to really understand. How do we combat that?
We recognize what that approach did for us and recognize that it's not applicable to kids today, right? I learned a hell of a lot about systems, building Linux, forking Linux. I ran my own internal distro for a while because we had to. And it was great, right? I've got a physics background. I was able to use my systems analysis experience from that, convert it over to here. And it was wonderful. What I didn't have to do was learn assembly or work with bit registers, which is what the people in the generation before me had to do. And they were telling me, oh, you got to really learn this to understand what's going on. And I did not, right? Do I understand enough? Can I muddle my way through if I have to? Yeah. I get a book, I read it. You can work your way through on things like that if it's outside of your domain. But the fact is, I have never truly needed to understand the basics and work at the basic level of computing, right? We like to teach analyzing packet captures and how all of the TCP/IP UDP packets work. I think it's interesting. I definitely think it's interesting. I think if you're going to do deep network analysis, you need to know it. But if you're going to do security analysis on what's going on with this, you need Wireshark. You don't need to do all of that stuff by hand. Kids today are not going to need to install operating systems when they're adults because they're going to come with the device. It makes me sad they're not going to have the exact same experience that I had because it was such a good experience for me. But I have to recognize they're going to have other experiences, right? They're going to be integrating AI into various things that they're interested in, right? They're going to learn how to use different types of prompting to get around stuff. Do you all know about the Gandalf password guessing tool in AI?
No.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Lakera, Gandalf.Lakera,
yeah.
I think it is.
Yeah.
It's basically a game where you go through levels by trying to get the AI to give you the password.
Yeah. At level 1 is easy. It's what's the password, right? When I learned about the tool, I played with it a little bit. I had a long drive with 2 of the kids, and I said, open up your phone, go here. And they proceeded to spend the rest of the drive hacking the AI to try to get to the next level of the game, right? That's the age, that's the time when I was trying to get random stuff to work on, early versions of Windows and, trying to figure out how to get the TCP/IP stack loaded so I could log into something and download the TCP/IP stack and dealing with all of that kind of stuff, right? It's problem solving. It's the same kind of problem solving that our generation learned to do. They're just doing it differently. To jump all the way back to the spelling thing. I get that there are issues with spelling a word correctly enough that spell check can take over. But you know what the kids do when they're in that situation? They turn on voice to text. They hit the microphone, they say the word, they go, oh, that's how it's spelled, and they move on.
I like that it allows you to, in this context, Josh, allows you to focus on what you really want to do. I think I agree. Many of us had to build Linux systems and networks from scratch because we had to do that, and that was not the end. It was a means to the end, right? And it was
Yeah.
valuable experiences. But what I'm hearing is that some of that stuff might, we are a little bit higher level in some of those areas so that we can maybe go deep in other areas if we want to. If you're going to be an operating system engineer, you're going to have to know that. If you're doing that work, you have to know that stuff. But if you're doing some other job, you don't need to be an expert in some of these other areas. But I think the opportunity is, because I don't want to see that knowledge lost, is you may have an LLM that can explain that stuff to you. So you do gain some understanding. And I think LLMs is a learning tool to go, explain to me assembly language programming and like give me, some tutorials to do so I can familiarize myself. We never had those tools before, right? Like I've asked ChatGPT stuff like, explain this concept to me in, as like a fifth grader. And then I go back to like reading the super technical thing or whatever that I was reading. And I like it for that purpose as a learning tool to help me understand things that right now I'm not looking to go deep into, right? But I need certain level to accomplish my goal.
LLMs are great for translating like that.
Yeah.
Like take this technical thing and make it simple for me to understand.
Mm-hmm.
So I have another question on the idea of education. I hear what you're saying about there's sort of a constant evolution of what we learn and how we learn, and that changes. Do you have any thoughts or ideas or examples of how AI promotes and encourages critical thinking? Because that's something that we've talked off and on in the show about over the years, of something that's often missing in our profession, if not all of society. Critical thinking, how does AI help with that?
All right. Let's take a quick dive into history on the critical thinking topic, because for most of human history, critical thinking was a tool that was intentionally not given to people because it threatened the people in power. Right? You look at monarchies, you look at religions, you look at empires. The people that were taught the critical thinking were typically either put under the people in power so that they could help keep them in power, or shuffled off into academia so they were safely out of the way. Before academia, it was monasteries and things like that. So it's not new that people don't have the critical thinking skills we all want them to have. What is new is we're able to talk about it now. So when I look at, AI as an example, but, I look forward at the bigger world, kids today understand the world as a whole more accurately than I could possibly have done at their age. And it's the internet that does it, right? They may be getting their information from YouTube and TikTok. I got my information from reading the World Book Encyclopedia because I grew up in the middle of nowhere, and that's what you did because there was nothing else to do. But it's interesting when you think about how AI is useful and how AI fails. Right now, most people are just playing with AI. When you get to the point of wanting to solve a problem, that problem is either one that has been solved in the past or one that is brand new. Problems that have been solved in the past, you can look up on the internet. Right now, you look it up and you get a bunch of conflicting advice from, Stack Exchange and Reddit and places like that. And we kind of fumble our way around. You can use AI to pull that information for you quicker or figure it out, dig a little bit deeper. But problems that are already solved should not take that much time to solve again. And I think AI makes that better. Problems that are new, AI can help if the problem's in a domain the AI understands. Many of them will not be. And the skill that kids develop in using AI to work through their understanding of a problem space and solve new problems is going to give us the ability to solve these problems much more quickly in new and interesting ways, and to screw up much more quickly in new and interesting ways. And I think that the kids that are in school today are going to learn the difference, right? Another thing that's fascinating about the critical thinking piece is how people are discounting real information as misinformation because they know AI can generate things. And it's disturbing on one level, but on another level, it's fascinating to watch a generation of people growing up with the core belief of you cannot automatically believe what you see and hear. And what that's going to mean long term, what techniques they're going to develop for identifying truth, I'm really looking forward to see what that turns into.
The next generation will be born with deepfakes, basically.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the generation, the kids today have never lived in a world without the internet. They've never lived in a world.
Josh, did
Sorry?
just saying the words kids today, did that make you feel old?
No, I felt old for a long time.
Okay, that's cool.
So, you know, it's interesting to recognize that, and when I say kids, right, the ones I'm specifically talking about that I see every day, right? The youngest is 8, the oldest is 15, 16 now. None of them have lived in a world in which if they had a question, they couldn't get it answered immediately, right? Because either they have a device that does it for them, or they have an adult nearby that has a device that does that. Now, maybe they've had adults that didn't know how to do that.
Yeah,
but
Josh, this is something I've been thinking about. And I think about the lies that were told to me growing up that I could have easily debunked had I had the internet or, you know, heaven forbid, an LLM. And the two, let's see if I can think of the two that are most popular. One is you got to wait 30 minutes before you can go in the pool after you eat.
Right.
That was a lie.
When I was a kid, it was an hour.
The other one,
So that's the evolution.
The top two that grind my gears, that's one. Number two is you can't have any coffee or caffeine because that will stunt your growth.
Yep.
Also a lie. I don't know why I was told those lies growing up. I don't know
also
why.
Something about hair on your palms, right, Paul?
That too.
But that one's true. Look at
that's more of a trope than it was, I think, something that was told you. Like, I truly believe, like, oh, I can't have caffeine because it'll stunt my growth. And then I'm like, wait, how is that, back to answering questions, right? Now every child lives in a world where they can ask a computer a question. Now they can get an answer, right? Whether or not you trust that answer or not is a different discussion. They can get an answer that reasonably, like, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out to go on the internet and go, oh, caffeine doesn't stunt your growth, right? And then you can validate that because you can go back to your doctor or someone who has that knowledge and validate that answer.
Yeah. I've done things like ask a question of ChatGPT and then ask the same question of Bard, and then tell each of them what the other one said and see what happens, right? Kids experience the world through constant interaction. And if that's how they learn best, AI can certainly give them that experience, right? It's more available than adults are, especially in the world we live in now where we're all so busy all the time. As much as we'd all like to be there for the kids when they have a question, sometimes the answer is go figure it out for yourself, right? For me, that was, okay, I'll go to the encyclopedia. Kids now, it's like I'll open up the iPad and I'll ask Siri or whoever, what the answer is. But we're getting, and very quickly, we're getting to the point where a kid can ask a question of AI, see the faulty logic, challenge the AI, all the faulty logic, and get to the right answer very quickly. When, we didn't have those skills at the age of 12. Right? We believed a lot of stuff that was crap because we had no other way to get that information. What's it going to mean for a generation of kids that grow up where you can iteratively arrive at the truth more and more quickly every year? It's going to break politics. That's for damn sure.
I'm sorry. How are kids today learning logic flaws at such an early age? How are they learning to detect that? I'm curious.
It's implication, right? It's you ask a question, what does the answer imply? And,
Mhm.
you see it, or I see it, when they're watching TikTok, right? And they talk about particular content creators as being funny but wrong a lot, right? Or they say something that conflicts with something else that they've seen, and they work through the conflicts. They're immersed in so much more information than we were, that they see the conflicts more clearly than we ever have.
But what makes them do that and not just, see what they're seeing and just move on?
Well, I think part of it's intelligence. I think part of it is talking to other kids, right? I mean, there's absolutely a lot of belief in the lies that are out there, but I don't think it's any different than we had on the lies that we were told on the school playground and things like that. It's
Mm.
it's being human, right? Humans, will believe a certain thing because it was told by an authority until enough evidence accumulates that it casts some doubt on that. And at that
Josh, do you
point,
think, I'll stop you there. Do you think the younger generation is going to be better at validating that stuff and challenging those notions because they grew up, I shouldn't say better with, they grew up with technology where they know how to ask it questions and can more easily validate those things?
I think they're better at it now.
Yeah.
It's not going to be. They're better at it now. They're better at some things now than we are today, right? And you see a lot of it.
Oh no, I
With
see it. The reason I asked that, Josh, because I see it today. If we can all agree that, and forgive the like language and analogies, right? But the boomers hang out on Facebook. If we can all buy into that. When I've seen a couple of posts, one was an electric vehicle parked in, or a regular vehicle parked in the EV spot blocking it, and the other one was the Providence schools here in Rhode Island are going to use EVs as buses are going to be EVs,
Yep.
to electric buses. The comments on Facebook, I was like, oh my God, like you don't really know how electric vehicles work like at all, and you're just feeding all of these like ridiculous preconceived notions. Where I feel like the younger generation can go to an LLM, can go to Google, can get the resources together to understand how this stuff works a little better, and not just believe what has been floating around out there, kind of like what the older generation did because they existed before the internet. They were just going like, buy what everyone says. I'm like, you don't have to start an electric vehicle. Like it goes. Like there's no starting it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that because of the internet and the way that the kids experience the internet, they have a much broader information base than we ever did. In other words, you can think of our generation as GPT-2, well, their generation is GPT-4, right? Much bigger training set that they've had, because that's the other piece. It's not just the neural network for the AI and the machine learning. The kids are neural networks too, as are we, right? Different ones certainly work a little bit differently, but trained on data, believe falsehoods, will hallucinate information. And, we do that as people. The joke I had back when I first saw people using ChatGPT in business is, oh, it's like the boss's nephew. Right? The 18-year-old that's in the office that has power, that has opinions, that is telling you things that are absolutely not true, but you have to have him be there because he's the boss's kid, right? That's where AI is today. As we get to more specialized AI, as we get towards general intelligence, which I'm a little on the fence as to when exactly that might happen. There's a lot of conflicting information there. But it's changing things and recognizing how we interact with information and how information availability and trustworthiness changes culture is something we have to be aware of. We're going to wake up one day and we won't recognize the world we're in.
Does are teachers going to be replaced someday with AI, or what's that progression in your mind look like, Josh? I think science fiction is a terrible example of like where AI can go, but it's an example we can all that like lives in our minds, because those of us that are sci-fi fans, and most of us nerds are sci-fi fans, when you watch and read a lot of sci-fi stuff, the teachers in the future are all basically AI robots. I don't know that are we going there? Is it, what do you think?
So I think we're in transition. I think teaching as a profession is going to be profoundly affected by AI, which, is why I wrote the reference, which I think you're going to post a link somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I want that transition to be as, I want it to damage as few people as possible. And if it's going to damage people, I want it to damage the teachers and not the kids. I think when we look at schools in 20 years, we're going to see AI is not going to exist as a thing. It's not going to be called AI. It's going to be part of the tooling they use, right? In the same way that Desmos has replaced the graphing calculator, right? And that laptops have replaced the handwriting on long pads. It's just going to be a change. And what I'm hoping I'll see is that I'll see kids learning at younger ages what we were taught at older ages, right? There's no reason a kid in middle school can't do calculus, right? Except that they have to learn the number patterns in particular ways and things like that before calculus can really make sense. But in a lot of ways, calculus is fancy adding, right? And I think through AI, we'll find more ways to teach to the way the kids are willing and able to learn.
Yeah.
And I think we'll get acceleration of the boring stuff and more time on the fun stuff. And I'm hoping that will mean happier, more well-adjusted adults that come through the process. Because we have to acknowledge that school damages an awful lot of kids today.
Or just doesn't give them the right opportunities to learn what they want to learn. I've always been a big fan of, hey, you know what? Like, I learned to program in elementary school. Why can't other people? Like, I don't think I'm that smart, but I just happen to have the right people putting me at the right places that taught me the right things. And so, what were you saying, Bill?
I said I don't think you're that smart either.
Thanks, Bill. Love you, man. So glad you're there to back up my statements when I make statements like that. I expect nothing less. But with AI and LLMs, maybe that affords kids more of the luxury to go, hey, I wanna try that, right? Like maybe there's a program or something in school that you're like, hey, instead of study class sitting around doing nothing, you get to pick from this list and go learn something. And there's a curriculum there for you. And why not teach kids calculus, programming, whatever? And maybe they're like, wow, this is not for me. This is terrible. I'm not ready, whatever. But there's going to be a percentage of kids that are going to be like, this is really awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And having the kids be able to pursue what they're interested in instead of being forced to, read Huckleberry Finn and write a 5-paragraph essay about that, why not let the kids do more what they want to do and use the technology to make sure that as they do that, they're learning what they have to learn? I think that makes a lot of sense.
So, Josh,
sorry, Bill, and then Jeff.
Well, I have a joke, so I'm just going to let Jeff go first.
Okay. Jeff, and then Bill.
It's a serious discussion here. Similar to my question on critical thinking, thoughts on AI versus the liberal arts. I don't know what you call it, version of teaching or version of education, form of education.
So, I went to, I will say, a incredibly liberal arts school, where the requirements were pretty minimal. As long as you took enough classes and had the bare minimum in your major, you could graduate. And I think that The joke, there's water again. The joke I always tell is that particular school. Sorry?
I couldn't resist. Is this a thirst trap?
Nice. No, this is me being in a very dry building, which I'm not used to because I'm traveling this week. Okay. The school that I went to prepared me very well for being 40 and very poorly for graduating at 23. I think that from a liberal arts perspective, you can learn things in many, many different ways. And, right now, the 4 kids are in 3 different schools. One is STEM focused, one is Montessori based, and the other is project based. And it's what's best for the kids, right? Each one is learning as best fits their personality, their interests, things like that. I think AI is going to make it possible to do that at a fine-grained level we've not seen before. Right. You mentioned science fiction earlier. Stevenson's Diamond Age postulates an AI book that is specifically designed to train the elite by focusing on specific things that best match that kid's interests at that given time. We don't necessarily need something quite like that, but by saying, you're expected at this age to know these things by the end of the year. Here are the 1,000 paths you could possibly take. The first step could be any of these. Pick something. What looks interesting? If it's wrong, work with the AI to find a different path.
But Josh, I want to
great book for the record.
Yeah, and I want to harp on the liberal arts thing because I'm of the opinion, and it's fine if you disagree, but I'm of the opinion that years ago, when college was much cheaper, many people said, I'm going to college, I'm going to do liberal arts. Now, many of them, liberal arts meant I'm going to go drink and do keg stands, which, okay, fine. But for many, also, they were going to college to go, I don't really know what I want to do with my life, and I'm of the opinion that that's okay. So I'm going to do liberal arts. I'm going to try a bunch of stuff and figure out what I really like, and then I'm going to specialize in that. And yeah, college may take 5 or 6 years, not the 4 that's, predetermined. And you could do that because college wasn't as expensive as it is now. Now I feel like when you're going into college, you gotta if you want to go get a degree, you better be sure that's what you're going to do because it's so damn expensive. But now my question is, can AI and or LLMs or any kind of AI help modernize?
You do a keg stand?
Help me do a keg stand, but also help modernize this process, right? Help us people have that experience to go, why am I expected to know what I want to do with my life? I'm still kind of I don't know, what do I want to do with my life next? We're always on that journey. Yeah. Can we help kids like this?
Yeah. From an educational perspective, the number one thing that AI does that's the big advantage is it gets the crap out of the way faster. Right? And it gives the people more time to explore. It gives people more time to think. It gives people more time to argue. Maybe that'll be arguing with the AI instead of people. But, we learn best by making mistakes. And the more time you have to make mistakes, the more you're going to learn, the better you're going to learn. So if we get all of the garbage out of the way up front, right, and by automating that stuff away, and make the cycles faster, just like we see with Agile, right? Mm-hmm. If you make the cycles faster, you get better quality work sooner. You get better education soon. It's really the way to go. And you inadvertently hit one of my hot buttons because liberal arts is great, and it was great for me, right? It's made me a good life. It's made me a good career. But what we need also that nobody has is a liberal arts trade school. How are you going to know that you want to be an electrician before you try it out?
Liberal trades.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, we used to, when I was a kid back in the 18th century, we had vocational schools, at least in the county where I grew up, they changed names over the years, magnet schools or whatever. But if you wanted to learn auto mechanics, there was one particular high school you went to, and they had programs where they'd put you on a bus and you'd go to that high school for the afternoon to learn auto mechanics.
Did they have one you could learn about magnets?
You had a wood shop and a metal shop and various other things, so that you could at least figure out, do you like working with your hands?
And they still
have
have
that.
that
High school when you learned how to type on a manual typewriter.
And they still have that today. In fact, in Rhode Island, if you want to do a vocational, I don't know if they still call it that, but if let's say you want to do woodworking and your local high school doesn't have woodworking even at the level that you want to, because there's different levels of these programs in different schools, you can go, well, I'm going to go to this high school in this other town. They're like, yeah, absolutely, go do that, and you can go to that other school, which I think is a hugely positive. My oldest is in. We happen to live in a town where he wants to do welding, and welding is a great program at the school and has ties, and everyone that graduates welding from the Coventry High School gets a job, and I'm like, great, perfect.
Yeah, those programs exist. I'm talking about something a little bit different, right?
Okay.
So the school I went to, there was one required freshman class, and it was a class that taught you how to write, right? I'm not saying that's the right path for everybody, but what they want you to do is take random classes for your first 2 years and then pick a major. With the theory being you don't actually know what you want to learn until you've had the exposure. There are vocational programs throughout most of the U.S. And if a kid thinks, oh, I want to learn woodworking or I want to learn welding or something like that, they can go and do that. But there are a lot of kids that are, I don't know what I want to do, so I'm going to sit at home and play video games, right? Now, not knocking on video games, but what if there were a system where they could more easily explore what types of things they might want to do? What if it turns out there's a kid that's particularly gifted in welding and literature, and AI frees up their schooling enough that they can do both? Right? What would a world look like with that kind of approach to education? I think it'd be a lot better than it is today.
Good Lord, I'd be on a whole different career path, I think, today.
Yeah.
So I have another question for you, and this is more philosophical, I guess, sociological. COVID exposed that, not every child in America, at least, had access to the internet and technology and smartphones and laptops and workstations and tablets and things like that. How do we assure that everybody has the opportunity to use all this wonderful AI technology as part of their learning experience?
Okay. You're not going to like my answer, but the answer is we don't. Our generation cannot do that. We grew up, our neural networks have been trained on a different model of fairness than the generation coming up. They're going to be the ones to fix that problem for their kids. I would love it. If I could say, oh, we need broadband across the U.S., right? We need free Chromebooks to all kids. And you're going to get into a whole bunch of conversations at the political level of, I don't want my taxes going for that, blah, 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 right? The generation coming up grew up in a world where Reddit and Tumblr and, potentially MySpace, right? All of these social media systems came up, which allowed people that have not had voices traditionally to have voices. And their concept of fairness is fundamentally different than what our generation is, and very different from the one above, right? I'll give an example. Hopefully this isn't going to go too far off the rails here. But there's a novelty folk song called The Scotsman, right? And I was playing it for one of the kids, and because we were talking about funny music, and it was one of the first novelty songs I heard as a kid. And for those that don't know, it's a song about a Scotsman that gets drunk and passes out, and because Scotsmen don't wear anything under their kilt, two women walk by, lift the kilt, and see. And it's a catchy, funny song for my generation. Yep. The kid's response was, wow, that's the funniest song about sexual assault I've ever heard.
Wow. But he won first prize.
Right.
Right?
But that's their default. That's the way that they see the world is through fairness. And it's a type of fairness that we don't even see because we grew up in a system that hid it from us because it benefits from harming, minorities and things like that. When those people are given a voice and that voice is present in the world all of these kids are growing up in, it's going to result in a fundamentally more fair world.
Interesting answer.
Josh, I want to thank you for coming on the show this evening. I liked the discussion. It was a very different discussion about AI and LLMs that we hadn't had on the show. So I want to thank you very much for the interesting and unique perspectives that you brought to us and our audience today.
Bravo.
Thank you. It was good to be here.
Yes, it was good seeing you, and you're welcome back anytime. And with that, we will take a short break and come back with none other than Matt Carpenter. Stay tuned.